Hello, I'm Lisa. A homeless mother living in a park with my son, Cameron. We don't have a home. All we have is a thin tarp spread on the ground, our home for the night. Life has brought us here, from being a stable working mother to being homeless. It feels like we're wandering in this vast world with nowhere to belong. I used to be an English teacher at a high school. My life, though not wealthy, was steady. I had a husband, a job, and a roof over our heads. But everything changed after my marriage fell apart. Shortly after, I lost my job and couldn't keep up with the bills. One bad decision after another spiraled us into financial ruin. The divorce left me with nothing, and now my son Cameron and I live in the streets. Despite everything, Cameron has a gift. One I never expected. He's 11 years old, but he's already a chess prodigy. Since he was 7, he's had an incredible understanding of the game. At first, it was just something we did together to pass the time, but soon I realized that he wasn't just playing for fun. He was trying to master it. We've had an old, battered chess set that I bought secondhand. It's chipped and worn, but to Cameron, it's more than just a game. It's his escape, his way of finding peace in a world that's been anything but kind to us. Every day he practices with that set, coming up with strategies, studying different moves, and playing against himself. Every time I ask, "Cameron, is there anything you want?" he always answers softly, "I just want to play chess, Mom." I never could have imagined we'd end up like this, living in a park struggling to survive. But even though things are tough, Cameron doesn't complain. He just keeps playing. I often wonder if we'll ever get out of this situation. I'm a mother of a talented child, but I can't give him the stability he deserves. I can't provide him with a home or a chance to thrive the way other children do. I worry about his future and how he'll face the world that already sees us as the poor ones. But even in the face of hardship, Cameron holds his head high. He doesn't let the mocking or the looks from others affect him. He just focuses on his game, moves his pieces, and dreams of a better life. One that's more than what our current circumstances allow. He's determined to prove that he's more than just the homeless kid. One afternoon, while Cameron and I were sitting in the park, the sound of children playing soccer echoed nearby. Cameron was focused on his game, a chessboard spread out between us. He had been working on a particularly challenging opening for days, and today he seemed determined to perfect it. As usual, I watched him closely, knowing this little game was more than just a pastime for him. It was his way of escaping, of dreaming of something bigger. Then out of nowhere, a voice interrupted my thoughts. "That's a pretty impressive game for someone your age." I looked up to see an older man standing nearby watching us. He was well dressed in a crisp gray suit, and his presence seemed out of place in the park. I gave him a hesitant smile, unsure of how he'd react to seeing a homeless woman and her son playing chess on the ground. "I've been watching your son for a while now," the man said, nodding toward Cameron. "He's good. Really good." Cameron, completely absorbed in his game, didn't look up. But I could see his face flush with pride. Even though he was quiet and reserved, I knew he loved hearing praise about his talent. He'd been playing for years, and while I supported him, it was moments like this that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, he could rise above his circumstances. The man introduced himself as David. He told me that he had been a chess coach for years and that he had seen plenty of kids play, but none with Cameron's natural talent. He said it wasn't often he saw someone so young with such a deep understanding of the game. "I run a chess club in the city," David explained. "We have a tournament coming up next week. I'd like to invite your son to join." I was shocked. A tournament? Cameron had always dreamed of participating in one, but the idea of competing against other children who had real lessons, professional coaches, and the right equipment seemed impossible. We didn't even have enough money to buy food most days, let alone pay for tournament entry fees or the equipment required for such an event. I hesitated. "I'm not sure we can afford it," I said softly, my heart sinking. David smiled kindly. "Don't worry about the fee. Consider it my gift to him. He deserves the chance." I was hesitant, but I could see the excitement in Cameron's eyes when he finally looked up from his chessboard. He didn't say anything, but I could tell he was eager, thrilled at the thought of finally competing in a tournament. I looked at David, weighing the options in my mind. "Are you sure?" I asked. I don't know what we can offer in return." David simply shrugged. "I don't need anything in return. I've seen his potential. If you're willing, I'd like to see him get that chance. You never know where it could lead." I looked at Cameron once more, and the determination in his eyes convinced me that this was an opportunity one couldn't deny him. "We'll do it," I said, my voice filled with a mix of excitement and fear. "Thank you." David handed me a brochure for the tournament, and we set a date to meet the following week. I didn't know how we were going to manage everything, but I knew one thing for sure. This was Cameron's chance to show the world what he was capable of. Maybe this tournament was the turning point we both needed. As the days passed and we prepared for the event, I could see the change in Cameron. He practiced harder than ever, working on his strategy, his opening moves, and his endgame. Every time he faced an opponent, whether in his mind or on the board, he was calm and focused. This was his time, and he wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. We didn't have much, just the clothes on our backs and the chess set, but for once I felt like we had something valuable to offer. Cameron's determination gave me hope that no matter how hard life had been, there was a way out. This tournament could be the first step toward a future where Cameron wasn't defined by his circumstances, but by his talent. That night, as I tucked Cameron into bed in our makeshift home, I whispered, "I believe in you, Cameron. I always will." He smiled, his eyes shining with a quiet confidence. "I know, Mom. I'm going to make you proud." And for the first time in a long time, I felt that maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay. The day of the tournament arrived sooner than I expected. I barely slept the night before, too anxious about everything. How we would get there, what would happen if we didn't have enough money for transportation, and what Cameron would face once he walked into that fancy building filled with well-dressed kids and their professional-looking coaches. I wanted to protect him from all of it, but I knew deep down that this was something he had to do for himself. When we arrived at the tournament venue, the first thing I noticed was how out of place we seemed. The other children were wearing brand new clothes, carrying expensive chess sets, and had their parents talking to the coaches like they belonged in this world. Cameron, with his worn sneakers and second-hand clothes, stood silently beside me, his small chess set clutched tightly in his hands. I tried not to show my nerves, but I could feel the weight of judgment in the air. David had already arrived, waiting at the registration table. When he saw us, his face lit up with a warm smile, and I felt a rush of relief. At least there was someone here who believed in Cameron. "Hey, you made it." David greeted us. His energy was contagious, and for a moment I saw Cameron relax a little. "Hi, David," I said, my voice shaky. I didn't know what to expect, but, "We're here." David laughed, clapping Cameron on the back. "That's the most important part. Now, Cameron, are you ready to show them what you've got?" Cameron nodded, his face determined. He wasn't speaking much, but I could see the spark in his eyes. The same spark I'd seen in him ever since he was a little boy. It was the same spark that made him stay up late at night, practicing moves on his old chessboard, hoping for a chance like this. As the tournament began, I couldn't help but watch nervously from the sidelines. The other children, much more confident, sat at their boards with ease. I could hear their parents whispering to each other, talking about which child was likely to win, which one had the best coach who had taken lessons for years. I caught a few of their glances toward Cameron, those quick, dismissive looks, and I knew what they were thinking. They were thinking that Cameron didn't belong here. He was just a poor, homeless kid who had no business competing in a tournament like this. Cameron didn't let it bother him, though. He sat down at his board, focused entirely on the game in front of him. His first match was against a boy around his age, and from the moment they began, it was clear that Cameron had the upper hand. The other boy moved hastily, making careless mistakes, while Cameron thought through every move with precision. It was a beautiful thing to watch, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride for my son. But then, after Cameron made a brilliant move, I noticed the whispers. A group of parents sitting near the back of the room exchanged glances. One of them leaned over and whispered something. I couldn't catch all of it, but the words "he's just a poor kid" were loud enough for me to hear. I could feel the sting of their judgment in my chest. Cameron didn't hear them. He was too engrossed in his game. As the match went on, he calmly made his moves, outsmarting his opponent at every turn. Eventually, the boy conceded defeat and Cameron stood up, a quiet sense of triumph in his eyes. He didn't smile, he didn't need to. The game spoke for itself. I could see the surprise in the other children's faces, especially the ones who had been so sure of their own skills. Cameron wasn't just playing for the game, he was playing for a chance to prove that he was more than the world thought him to be. For him, it wasn't just about winning. It was about showing everyone that he had something valuable to offer, no matter where he came from. As Cameron moved on to the next round, I felt a sense of hope that I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. This tournament wasn't just a competition. It was a chance for Cameron to show the world that he was more than the homeless kid they thought him to be. It was a chance for me to see my son step into a world that for so long had shut him out. The next round was tougher. His opponent was older, more experienced, and seemed far more confident. Cameron sat at the board, his fingers hovering over the pieces, calculating each move with a quiet intensity. He wasn't as quick as his opponent, but his strategy was more methodical. The other boy tried to rush through his moves, but Cameron's calm, measured approach slowly started to turn the tide. When the match ended, Cameron had won again. This time there was no shock on his face. It was as though winning had become the natural result of his hard work and focus. I wanted to run over to him, wrap him up in my arms, and tell him how proud I was. But instead I stayed where I was, watching him stand tall in a world that hadn't been kind to him, watching him finally take his place among the best. As Cameron left the table, I could see the respect in the eyes of his opponents. And for the first time I saw something else in their eyes too, something that wasn't just about his chess skills, but about the fact that Cameron had earned his place here against all the odds. But as I looked around the room, I could still hear the whispers and see the glances. They hadn't forgotten who he was. But Cameron wasn't playing to prove them wrong, he was playing for himself. And in that moment I realized that maybe, just maybe, this tournament was the beginning of something much bigger for him. It wasn't just about the game anymore. It was about taking control of his future, and showing the world that no one, no matter their background, should ever be underestimated. As the tournament went on, Cameron and I were both caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The initial excitement from his victories slowly started to wear off, replaced by a growing sense of pressure. With each win, Cameron moved closer to the final rounds, and with each new opponent the stakes seemed higher. The other players had been in these tournaments before. They were used to the competition, accustomed to the spotlight. And then there was Cameron, quiet, humble, and determined, who was still struggling to shake off the labels that others had placed on him. By the time the third round came, I could see the doubt creeping into Cameron's eyes. His opponent was older, about 15, a seasoned player with a reputation for dominating tournaments. He wore a brand new chess shirt, his set was immaculate, and his posture exuded confidence. Cameron, on the other hand, sat with his old chess set worn and patched, and his clothes were a bit too big. He looked small in comparison, almost out of place. I could tell that he was feeling the weight of this match more than the others. When the match started, I could sense the difference immediately. The older boy played aggressively, making bold moves, while Cameron took his time, calculating each one carefully. I watched nervously from the sidelines as the game unfolded. Cameron was trying to keep his focus, but I could see his eyes flicker from the board to the audience, to the other competitors. I knew he could feel their eyes on him, judging him, waiting for him to slip up. And then it happened. Cameron made a mistake. A small mistake, one that wouldn't have been fatal in a less high-stakes game. But it was enough to give his opponent the upper hand. The boy pounced on the opportunity, advancing quickly, pushing Cameron into a corner. The crowd around them seemed to hold its breath. "Come on, Cameron," I whispered to myself, clutching my hands tightly together. "You can do this." But as the game continued, I could see that Cameron's confidence was shaken. His moves became slower, more uncertain. I saw his fingers twitch nervously as he reached for his pieces, and his shoulders hunched slightly, a sign that the weight of the moment was getting to him. The older boy, sensing Cameron's hesitation, pressed harder. With each move, the gap between them widened. Cameron was now down to his last few pieces, and I could see him starting to struggle, trying to think of a way out, a way to win, but the pressure was mounting. The whispers around me grew louder. I could hear a parent in the audience saying, "He's not going to make it. Poor kid doesn't stand a chance." Another voice added, "He got lucky in the earlier rounds, but this is too much for him. Just look at him." I could feel the sting of those words, and I saw the way they affected Cameron. He wasn't playing for the audience or for the other kids, he was playing for himself. But it was hard, so hard, to ignore the judgment, especially when it felt like the whole world was waiting for him to fail. In the final moments of the game, it was clear that Cameron was losing. His opponent, now with a commanding position on the board, looked smug. The crowd murmured, anticipating the end. And yet Cameron didn't give up. He still held on, moving his pieces carefully, though it was clear he was defeated. The moment came when Cameron's king was cornered and the game was over. The older boy stood up, shaking hands with Cameron in a show of sportsmanship. But Cameron didn't look up. His gaze was fixed on the board, and I could see the disappointment written all over his face. He walked slowly back to where I was sitting, his head down, his shoulders slumped. I could feel my heart breaking for him. I wanted to say something comforting, something to lift his spirits, but I couldn't find the words. What could I say? That losing didn't matter? That we'd keep going? Hey, you played great, I said, trying to keep my voice steady as Cameron sat down next to me. I lost, he whispered, his voice small. I wasn't good enough. I put my arm around him, holding him close. Cameron, you were amazing. You were playing against someone who's had years of experience. This doesn't define you. It's just one game. But Cameron wasn't listening. His eyes were still focused on the chessboard, his mind replaying the moves that led to his defeat. The tournament wasn't over yet. There were still rounds to be played, but for Cameron the loss felt like a mountain too high to climb. And the worst part was I couldn't fix it. I couldn't protect him from the pain of failure. But in that moment I remembered something important. The same thing I'd told him countless times. It's not about winning or losing, Cameron. It's about getting back up no matter how hard you fall. And I knew deep down that this was a lesson Cameron needed to learn, whether he wanted to or not. Life wouldn't always be fair and the world would never stop judging him. But that didn't mean he had to let it defeat him. What mattered was what he did next. I just hoped that, no matter how bad it hurt, Cameron would rise again, stronger and more determined than ever. The next day, Cameron woke up early, his face drawn with a mix of determination and exhaustion. We had spent the night in a shelter, the noise and chaos of so many people around us making it hard to sleep. But Cameron seemed determined to press on, despite the weight of his defeat. He didn't speak much as we packed up and headed back to the tournament, and I could tell that the loss was still weighing heavily on him. The final round of the tournament was fast approaching. Cameron had lost a few games already, but he had also won some. The other kids had underestimated him, but he had proven himself in the earlier rounds. I knew deep down that Cameron wasn't out of this yet. His loss to the older boy had been painful, but he still had the chance to finish strong. The tournament hall was quieter today as fewer kids remained. The others had been eliminated, and now it was just Cameron and a handful of other players left. His final opponent was a kid around his age, a boy with glasses and an air of quiet confidence. He didn't seem as aggressive as the older boy Cameron had faced, but there was a calmness to him, a sense that he knew exactly what he was doing. As Cameron sat down at the board, I saw something shift in him. Gone was the uncertainty and the self-doubt from the previous day. He was focused now, his eyes sharp, his fingers steady as he adjusted the pieces. There was no sign of the nervousness that had overtaken him earlier. In fact, it was as if he had transformed into a different person, one who was ready to fight, to win, and to show everyone what he was capable of. I could feel the tension in the air as the match began. I watched Cameron closely, his every move calculated, deliberate. The game moved fast, the two boys matching each other move for move, neither one giving up an inch. But this time Cameron didn't hesitate. He didn't let his opponent get inside his head. Instead, he played with the confidence I knew he had in him all along. The audience was watching now, murmuring quietly as the game went on. I could hear the occasional whisper about Cameron, but this time it wasn't mocking or dismissive. They were watching him closely, seeing how he was playing, seeing how he was holding his own. And with each move, Cameron's determination grew stronger. About halfway through the game, I noticed a shift. The other boy was starting to falter. Cameron's strategy was working, he was outmaneuvering him, controlling the pace of the game. With each move, Cameron was getting closer to victory. I could see the growing anxiety in his opponent's eyes, and I knew Cameron could feel it too. The final few moves came quickly. Cameron's fingers hovered over the pieces, and I held my breath as he made his next move, one that would change everything. Checkmate. Cameron had won. The room was silent for a moment, as if everyone was processing what had just happened. And then slowly applause began to break out. Quiet at first, then louder as more and more people realized what had just taken place. Cameron stood up, his face blank for a moment as he took in the victory. But then the smallest of smiles tugged at his lips and he looked up at me. I couldn't contain myself. I jumped to my feet, tears welling up in my eyes as I clapped. "You did it, Cameron," I whispered to myself. "You really did it." The other boy shook Cameron's hand, congratulating him with a respectful nod. But Cameron didn't care about the congratulations. He was looking at the board, still processing what had just happened. He had won, yes, but more than that, he had proven something to himself. He had faced doubt, ridicule, and fierce competition, and he had come out on top. In the end, it wasn't the trophy that mattered most to him. It was the fact that he had made it, despite everything. David, who had been watching from the sidelines, came over to congratulate Cameron. "That was incredible," he said, shaking Cameron's hand. "You really pulled it off. I knew you had it in you." Cameron nodded, his eyes still focused on the board. I could see the quiet pride in his face, but also the humbleness that had always been a part of him. He didn't need anyone to tell him he was good. He knew it now. And that was all that mattered. We left the tournament soon after, the trophy in Cameron's hands. It was small, not much to look at, but it was his proof of everything he had accomplished. As we walked through the streets back to the shelter, Cameron's steps were lighter than they had been in days. His head was high, his posture strong. He was no longer the homeless kid in his mind. He was a chess player. A winner. That night, as we sat in the dimly lit room, Cameron quietly placed the trophy on the small table. He didn't say much, but I could see the change in him. He had proved to the world and to himself that he could rise above any challenge. "Mom," Cameron said, his voice soft, "do you think this is the beginning of something?" I smiled, my heart full. "I think it's just the start, Cameron. Just the start." It's been a few weeks since the tournament, and the feeling of victory still lingers in the air. Every time I look at the small trophy sitting on the shelf in our tiny room, I'm reminded of how far we've come, and how much more there is still to accomplish. For Cameron, this was just the first step. But for me, it felt like we had climbed a mountain we never thought we could scale. The shelter we were staying in wasn't ideal, but it was safer than the park. And with Cameron's victory came something unexpected, a glimmer of hope. After the tournament, David had followed through on his promise. He had connected us with a youth chess foundation that provided free coaching and mentorship for kids with talent but limited resources. It was a small step, but a step toward something better. Every Saturday, Cameron and I would wake up before dawn to catch the early bus to the foundation's headquarters, an hour outside of town. The drive was long, but Cameron didn't mind. He loved the time spent in the car listening to music and thinking about chess. He had been practicing every night, running through strategies and studying new techniques. For the first time in a long time, I saw a different side of him. He was excited about the future, and that excitement was contagious. At the foundation, Cameron met other kids who had been in the same situation as him, kids who came from nothing but had big dreams. The coaches at the foundation were kind and patient, helping Cameron refine his skills. They saw the potential in him just like David did. They pushed him to be better, to think deeper, and to believe that he could make it. But it wasn't just about chess anymore. The foundation gave Cameron a sense of belonging. For the first time, he wasn't just the poor kid who had to live in a park. He was part of something bigger. He was part of a team of kids who were all chasing after their own dreams. Every weekend we would drive to the foundation, and every weekend Cameron grew more confident. His love for chess only deepened. And I saw a change in him, something I hadn't noticed before. The self-doubt that had haunted him was slowly starting to fade. He was no longer worried about being judged or compared to others. He was focused on his own growth, his own path. One Saturday, after a particularly long practice session, Cameron turned to me as we were heading home. "Mom," he said quietly, "do you think I could ever play in the national championships one day?" I looked at him, my heart swelling with pride. Cameron had always been modest, never seeking the spotlight. But here he was, asking if he could take his game to the highest level. "Cameron," I said, pulling him close, "I think you can do anything you set your mind to. You've already come so far. Who's to say where you can go from here?" He smiled at me, a smile so full of hope and confidence that it almost took my breath away. For the first time in a long time, I saw the same belief in him that I had always tried to hold on to myself. The world had told him he was nothing. But now he was telling the world, "I'm here. I belong." As the weeks passed, Cameron continued to excel. He started entering more tournaments, local ones at first, then regional competitions. With every victory, his reputation grew. And with every defeat, he became stronger, more determined. There was no longer any room for self-doubt in his heart. He was becoming the player he always dreamed of being. But more than that, he was becoming the person he was always meant to be. Resilient, confident, and unafraid to take risks. One evening, after a particularly intense tournament, Cameron came home with another trophy, this one a little bigger than the last. He walked into our small room, his face glowing with pride. He placed it carefully on the shelf next to his first trophy, the one that started it all. I couldn't help but laugh. "You're starting quite the collection, aren't you?" Cameron grinned. "I guess I am." He paused for a moment, then looked at me with that quiet determination. "I'm not stopping here, Mom. I'm going to keep going. There's more I can do. There's so much more." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't worry about what the future held. I knew that, no matter where life took us, Cameron was going to be just fine. He had proven to himself and to the world that he was more than just the homeless kid they had once dismissed. He was a champion, not just in chess but in life. As I looked at him, I realized that we had come so far. From the park to this small room, from living in fear of what others thought to standing tall, confident in our worth. Cameron had changed, but so had I. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were living. And the world better start paying attention because Cameron was going places. It's been months since that first chess tournament, and I've seen Cameron transform in ways I never could have imagined. Not just as a chess player but as a young man. The timid, self-doubting boy who once sat in a park playing with an old chipped chess set had turned into a confident, focused player who could stand his ground, no matter the opponent. The journey we've been on, starting from the streets, struggling with poverty and judgment, has been nothing short of incredible. But as I sit here watching Cameron practice, focusing intently on his moves, I realize that the most significant victory he's achieved isn't measured in trophies or titles. It's in his belief in himself. We still live in that small shelter, but things feel different now. We're no longer just surviving. Cameron's victories, both on and off the chessboard, have changed how we see the world. His success has opened doors. More opportunities for him and for us as a family. The foundation he joined has helped him get coaching, and he's now competing in bigger tournaments. I can already see his dreams taking shape, and I know without a doubt that he's destined for great things. But none of this would have happened if it weren't for that first tournament. The one where he stood at the board facing his opponent and held his ground despite everything. That tournament and his win weren't just about the game. It was about Cameron finally realizing that he belonged, that his talent was worth something, and that he had the power to carve his own path no matter where he came from. Last week, Cameron received an invitation to join a national youth chess championship. His name is now known in chess circles, and while it still feels surreal to see him in those positions, part of me knows it was only a matter of time. It's not just about chess anymore. It's about Cameron showing the world that he is more than his circumstances. He's more than what people saw when they glanced at him, dismissed him, and made fun of him. He's a force to be reckoned with. One evening, as Cameron sat at the kitchen table, reviewing his next move for an upcoming competition, I sat across from him, watching the quiet concentration on his face. He didn't see me, too absorbed in his thoughts and calculations, but I couldn't help but smile. "Mom," he said without looking up, "do you think this is all real?" I raised an eyebrow, confused. "What do you mean?" He finally looked up, meeting my eyes. "All of this. The tournaments, the coaching, the chance to go to the national competition. Do you think I'm really ready for it?" I leaned forward, my heart swelling with pride. "Cameron, you've been ready for this your whole life. You may not have had all the advantages, but you've had something even more important. Your mind, your heart, and your determination. Don't ever doubt that." He smiled softly, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a confidence in him that had been absent for years. Not arrogance, but a quiet knowing. A belief in himself that hadn't been there before. "You know," he said, tapping the chessboard lightly, "I used to think that I didn't belong. That I wasn't good enough. But now I know I can do this. I can be the player I've always wanted to be." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I've always known you could." That night, after a long practice session, we sat together eating dinner in our small, cluttered room. It wasn't much, but it was enough. We had each other. And that was more than enough. As I tucked Cameron into bed later that night, he turned to me, his eyes still full of that quiet confidence. "Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think I can really make it? I mean, really make it?" I kissed his forehead, brushing a lock of hair from his face. "I already know you will, sweetheart. You've got everything it takes." As I left the room, I closed the door softly behind me and stood there for a moment. My heart was full. The journey we had been on, The struggles, the losses, the setbacks had led us to this point. And in my eyes, this wasn't just about chess anymore. It was about life, about perseverance, and about never letting anyone define you. Cameron's victory wasn't just the win at the tournament. It was the fact that, despite everything, he had stood tall, faced the challenges head-on, and never gave up on his dreams. That was the true victory. And as I looked at him, lying in bed with the quiet sound of his breath filling the room, I knew that whatever came next he would be ready. This was just the beginning.